Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Ask the Pastor. And the question this week is, why did I get such a negative reaction in my gut when I saw President Trump holding up a Bible? Now, I have to admit that this is actually my question this week. And some of you maybe love Trump, some of you maybe hate him. He's a bit like human Marmite in that way. But I had a negative reaction when I saw him holding up a Bible. I don't normally turn on the TV, but on Monday night I did. And I just in time to see groups of people gathered around the White House, in time to see the police moving them all away, to see President Trump's speech about being the law and order president and calling upon the military to make sure there's law and order, and then to watch him walk across to a church and to, of course, hold up a Bible. And when he did that, I was just thinking to myself, oh, don't do that. I just took a real negative reaction to it. And why was that? Well, first off, because as a Canadian, I'm used to a greater sense of the separation of church and state. And actually, as a Baptist, I believe in the importance of the separation of church and state. And I've written about that before in my blog, and I'll leave a link to one of those articles about that. But secondly, it seemed to me that President Trump was equating this idea of being law and order, being the law and order president, with the Bible. And, well, the Bible points us to Jesus, and Jesus wasn't really a law and order kind of guy. In fact, Jesus was put to death by the law and order kind of people. We can think of the political leadership, the powers of Rome, who of course used crucifixion to kill Jesus. And we can think of the religious leaders, how the religious leaders of Judaism and how they instigated the Romans to put Jesus to death. And so there we see the political powers that be and the religious powers that be, those who have a real concern for law and order, putting Jesus to death and crucifying him. And, well, the Bible has a lot to say about justice and mercy and grace and love. And it has a lot to tell us about Jesus and the teaching of Jesus, who taught us to love our neighbors as ourselves, but also to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And so when you see that there's all these people gathering throughout many cities saying that Black Lives Matter and we need justice, then to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, wouldn't that be to listen to their stories? And what do you mean when you say that? Are we listening to the stories? I remember about this time last year was the most profound moment I had in a gathering of Baptists. And you can probably guess that as a Baptist pastor, I'm sometimes with other Baptists. And so we had the assembly of our Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec last year around this time, and there was a workshop at it. And at that, it was about people coming and telling their stories of how they experienced racism. And it was the most profound moment of any time I've been with and amongst Baptists, to hear their stories. And these weren't stories from back in the 60s and 70s. These were stories of people younger than me. These were stories of today's time. And these were people right in our nation of Canada. These were people that I knew, that I'm acquainted with, that I know their names. I know them. I didn't realize what they had experienced, the racism that they'd experienced growing up in Canada. Are we hearing the stories of racism? One of my sons has gone to social media to post about racism and the problem that it is. And one of the things he's done is he's put up his reading list of the books he's reading so that he can hear these stories of racism. So one of those books I've added onto my summer reading list. I want to hear these stories. We need to hear these stories. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And so let us be hearing these stories. We've been hearing a lot about elder abuse in nursing homes recently. You do realize, of course, that the PSWs sometimes they experience abuse from the elders. My wife was punched quite hard in the gut just last week. But something else my wife has seen as she works in a long-term care facility is the racism that sometimes the elders heap upon the workers. And there's quite a number of workers from Southeast Asia on work alongside my wife. And my wife sometimes sees the racism that they endure. And they will often say to Sandra things like, "Don't worry about it, we're used to it." Racism isn't something anybody should feel they have to get used to. Here is something that people should get used to. And it's from Revelation chapter 7. "After this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb." And it goes on to speak in this beautiful vision, a vision of the future, of people from all tribes and peoples and languages standing together. There's what we should be getting used to. And as Christian people, we don't want just to look to the future for the kingdom of God. We want to say, how can we be kingdom people right now? You see, there's no place in the kingdom of God for racism. And so there should be no place in kingdom people, followers of Jesus, for racism. I began with the question, why did I have such a negative reaction to seeing Trump holding up a Bible in that situation earlier this week? But actually the question should be, when I hold up a Bible, does that cause a negative reaction amongst people? We should really be asking ourselves and doing some soul searching and prayers of confession. Is there racism in me and in you? Well, that's the question for this week. Back to your questions next week, and feel free, if you have a question to ask, feel free to ask. God bless you.